How I originally got involved with Love Inc. was that my mother was one of the original volunteers who was involved. She was sort of running the warehouse when it very first started for a short time. And so sometimes I would help her when she was gathering things from places, or she would bring things home and need to sort through them, and I would help her in that aspect. And a few years in, they opened the Treasures for Love resale store, and they needed a manager for that. And I was looking for a very part-time job at the time, and it was a very part-time position. And came in, I already knew everybody in the ministry at that point, and I worked there for only a few months. I had some health issues and some other problems and wasn't able to stay there very long. But that was my first involvement. My first true involvement with Love Inc. was managing the resale store right at the very beginning of when it started. I heard about the LYN program again through my mother. I was in a pretty difficult position in life. I was pregnant actually at the time. I was pregnant and I wasn't able to have any sort of a job. I was disabled, and I couldn't really survive on my own. I needed help from different people and from the government. I got a lot of help from the government as far as food stamps and Medicaid, but even that wasn't really enough. And she told me about this program, and one of my big concerns with having a baby was, how on earth am I going to put diapers on this baby? Because they go through the diapers and they're not cheap. And she said they were starting this program, and that was one of the things you could earn was diapers and wipes. And so I was able to join in that way. So I ended up joining the program right after my son was born. He was 3 months premature. He was still in the NICU. He was born in November, and the program that I joined started in January. And so that was how I first heard about the LYN program, though, was through her, and through her telling me. I think they had been through one session, and I joined the second session. And it was mainly because I was very concerned about diapers and wipes, and she had told me that was how I could get them. And one thing led to another, and there I was. My major fear was that I knew everyone on the staff. I wasn't too concerned about the people in the program. I wouldn't know any of them. I would get to know them, but I knew the people on staff, and I was really concerned about coming in as a neighbor and just feeling like I was afraid I was going to feel lesser than. Because here I was suddenly in a position of need. I was the one that needed help rather than being the one to help. I had always been in a position of being the helper. And it was, I was kind of able to hide the fact that I needed the food stamps, the Medicaid, those things. I didn't have to tell anybody about that. That was something I could kind of keep to myself and do on my own. But now here I was entering a program where I had to get help from people I knew well. I knew personally, on a personal level. And so my big fear was just, I guess, being looked down upon and being thought of as lesser just because I was the one coming in need. They were dispelled immediately, because when I walked in, the greeter at the door was none other than Bill Roberts. And we've always had a good relationship. We always tease each other. And I walked in, and it was just like seeing him at the grocery store. It was exactly the same. There was no difference in our relationship. And the other people that I knew, it was exactly the same way with them as well. I just walked in, and the conversation was the same. I felt the same. Everything was the same as far as our relationship went. I never felt like anyone was looking down upon me. It was more like just a welcome, and it was like staff, volunteers, and the neighbors, like everyone was on a peer level, and no one was above anybody else. And it was a great way to start. I ended up sort of being adopted by some of the spiritual friends that came. I would take classes with their with the neighbors, and then the neighbors' spiritual friends and I would sort of form a bond. And there were a few women in particular that every time we saw each other, we would hug, and we'd talk to each other. We didn't talk throughout the week like the spiritual friends typically do with the neighbors, but every time I saw them, it was like a little mini family reunion, and it was so wonderful to see them. And they always cared about me and checked up on me, and they were wonderful. But one of them, her name is Bobby, and she adopted my son, kind of. She loved him. I think she worked with him in the nursery, and through that we became close. And when I graduated and I needed a spiritual friend to come graduate with me, I asked her, because she and I had become close to the point where we'd just get together. She would constantly call me and be like, "Hey, do you want a week or do you want a day off? I can watch Eli for the afternoon." And I'd just drop him off and he'd hang out with her. And she did that many times. When I was on dialysis, she would take care of him on certain days. If I was ever in need, I'd just text her or call her and I'd be like, "Hey, I need some help." And she's always been so loving and caring towards both me and Eli, and we love her so much, both of us. She's wonderful. I think LYN helped me transform and grow in my future relationship with Christ, where it was planting the seed that established my relationship with God. I'd love to say that during the LYN program, I gave my life to Jesus and everything just went uphill from there, but that's not how it happened. It was like LYN gave me the sense of community that you want from a church. And so I never really looked for a church home. I never really did much seeking in that aspect because I had LYN, and I lived with my mom, and some Sundays I'd tag along with her and go to her church, and I was like, I'm okay, I'm doing okay, but I didn't have a true relationship with God. And I think deep down in my heart I knew that, and LYN it was like putting a nail in my back, and it just kept pushing it further and further and further, where I just kept feeling it more and more, and my heart was just like, I was just overcome with this emotion of, you're not living the way you should, and you know that. And LYN really helped me grow by prolonging that not prolonging, but deepening that realization. And finally, after I had graduated the program, I finally gave my life to Christ, and I give so much credit to LYN for planting the seed, because when I started the LYN program, I wasn't too interested in church or God. I mean, I knew about God. I grew up in the church, but I wasn't really living the Christian life, and I was kind of okay with that. And by the end of Love Inc., I had so much guilt overtaking me that eventually I caved, I guess. I don't know. God found me. I turned my life around, and complete 180 for me. But I can absolutely say with 100% certainty that it was due to Love Inc. If I hadn't gone through the Love Inc. program, I don't think I would be where I am in terms of having a relationship with Christ. Our community should invest in Love Inc. because it is such an incredible organization. And it's not the organization itself, but the way it brings people together and brings churches together. I don't even remember how many different churches are represented with Love Inc. anymore, but it's a whole bunch of different churches, and hoping to bring in new ones all the time. And there's really no organization around here that I know of that does quite that task and does it so effectively as Love Inc. like I said, I had all sorts of government help as far as food stamps and Medicaid and WIC, and those programs were helpful in that they gave me food or they paid for me to go to the hospital. But every time I went to those appointments, I felt like a number. I never felt like a person. They didn't care about who I was. They cared only about the specifics of what my income was, what my, that type of thing. They did not care about who I was as a person. Whereas with the Loving Your Neighbor program, you come in and instantly you are a person. They treat you like a person, like an individual. And the people cared so much about learning who I was and learning my story. And, I'd come back week after week and they'd ask how my son was doing, or, something that had happened the week before. They would check in with me that next week and see if it was going better. And it was true care for who I was in my journey in life. And it's something that is really missing in our society today, is that care for people. There are so many who give away food and clothes, but Love Inc. gives away love. They love people so effectively and well. And I think it is one of the best organizations, as far as I've ever worked with, the best organization in terms of loving people. And I'm so thankful to have been a part of it on both sides, as a volunteer and also as a neighbor.